Human evolution is often imagined as something that happened in the distant past. Early humans changed. Their bodies adapted. Their brains became larger. Eventually, modern humans appeared. But evolution did not stop when civilization began. It is still happening. The difference is that modern human evolution is harder to see. Evolution does not deliberately create improvements. It is the result of inherited genetic differences becoming more or less common across generations because some differences affect survival, reproduction, or both. And modern humans are living under conditions that are very different from those experienced by our ancestors. Medicine has changed survival. Agriculture has changed diet. Cities have changed environments. Technology has changed behavior. And global migration has changed the movement of genes between populations. So what features are humans actually evolving today? Some are subtle. Some involve the immune system. Some affect how the body processes food. And some may change the way humans interact with their environment. One of the clearest examples of recent human evolution involves the ability to digest milk as an adult. Most mammals produce large amounts of the enzyme lactase during childhood. Lactase breaks down lactose, the sugar found in milk. After weaning, lactase production normally decreases. Humans are unusual because some populations evolved genetic variants that allow them to continue producing lactase throughout adulthood. This trait is called lactase persistence. It evolved independently in several populations, particularly in regions with long histories of dairy farming. The evolutionary advantage was straightforward. Milk provided calories, protein, fat, water, and minerals. For populations that regularly kept cattle, goats, or other milk-producing animals, being able to digest fresh milk could provide a nutritional advantage. The important point is that this adaptation is relatively recent. Large-scale animal domestication began only within the last several thousand years. That means a major change in human digestion occurred extremely recently in evolutionary terms. Human evolution did not need millions of years. Under strong environmental pressures, meaningful genetic changes can spread much faster. Some of the most important modern human evolutionary changes involve the immune system. For most of human history, infectious diseases were major causes of death. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, and other pathogens created powerful evolutionary pressures. Individuals carry genetic differences that influence how their immune systems recognize and respond to these threats. When a genetic variant provides protection against a particular disease, it can become more common in populations exposed to that disease over many generations. One famous example involves malaria. Certain genetic variants affecting red blood cells can reduce the risk of severe malaria. The best-known example is the sickle cell trait. People who inherit one copy of the sickle cell variant can have increased protection against severe malaria, while inheriting two copies can cause sickle cell disease. This is an example of balancing selection, where a genetic variant can remain common because carrying one copy provides an advantage under particular environmental conditions. Other genetic adaptations have also been associated with historical exposure to infectious diseases, including changes involving immune system genes such as those in the HLA region. The human immune system is therefore partly a record of ancient encounters with pathogens. Humans have also evolved to survive in environments where oxygen levels are lower. At high altitudes, atmospheric pressure decreases. The air still contains roughly the same proportion of oxygen, but each breath delivers fewer oxygen molecules to the body. For most people, prolonged exposure to high altitude causes physiological stress. But populations living at high elevations for thousands of years have developed genetic adaptations. Tibetan populations are a particularly well-studied example. Certain genetic variants, including variants associated with the EPS1 pathway, influence how the body responds to low oxygen. Instead of simply producing extremely high levels of red blood cells, some high-altitude populations have physiological systems that use oxygen more efficiently. Andean and Ethiopian populations have also developed adaptations to high-altitude environments, although their evolutionary solutions are not identical. This is important because it demonstrates that human evolution does not always produce one universal solution. Different populations can face similar environmental pressures and evolve different biological responses. Human skin pigmentation is another trait strongly influenced by evolutionary history. Melanin protects skin from ultraviolet radiation. High levels of ultraviolet radiation create strong selection for increased pigmentation because melanin helps protect important biological molecules, including folate. In regions with lower ultraviolet radiation, lighter pigmentation can increase the efficiency of vitamin D production. Human skin color is therefore closely connected to geography, sunlight, migration, and evolutionary history. But this does not mean that skin pigmentation is rapidly changing everywhere today. Modern migration has dramatically mixed populations that were previously separated for long periods. As populations mix, genetic variants associated with pigmentation can also become distributed in new combinations. The important evolutionary process here is not simply that humans are becoming lighter or darker. It is that global movement is changing the genetic structure of human populations. Human jaws and teeth have also changed considerably during recent evolution. Compared with many ancient human populations, modern humans generally have smaller jaws. One visible consequence is the increasing frequency of missing third molars, commonly called wisdom teeth. Some people naturally develop fewer wisdom teeth, or none at all. Genetic differences influence this trait, although jaw development and environmental factors also play important roles. The reduction of the human jaw is associated with changes in diet and food processing over human evolutionary history. Cooking and mechanical processing made food easier to chew. Over thousands of years, these changes were associated with reductions in jaw size and changes in facial structure. However, wisdom tooth absence should not be described as a simple universal evolutionary trend. Human populations differ, and the trait is influenced by multiple genetic and developmental factors. Evolution rarely follows a single straight line. Another important area of modern human evolution involves genetic resistance or susceptibility to disease. Some pathogens create intense selection because they affect reproductive success and survival. For example, variants in the CCR5 gene can influence susceptibility to HIV infection. A particular deletion known as CCR5 delta 3-2 reduces the ability of some strains of HIV to enter certain immune cells. The variant is found at relatively high frequencies in some European populations. Its original evolutionary history is still debated. One possibility is that historical pathogens exerted selection on the variant, but scientists have not established a single definitive explanation for why it reached its present frequency. This illustrates an important principle. Finding a genetic variant associated with disease resistance does not automatically prove why evolution favored it. Evolutionary biology often requires evidence from genetics, archaeology, epidemiology, and population history. Human diets have changed dramatically over the last several thousand years. Agriculture introduced large quantities of foods such as wheat, rice, maize, and other domesticated crops. This changed the nutritional environment experienced by human populations. Different populations subsequently experienced different selective pressures. Genes involved in digestion, metabolism, and nutrient processing can vary between populations. One well-known example is variation in the AMY1 gene, which is involved in producing salivary amylase, an enzyme that begins starch digestion in the mouth. Some populations with historically starch-rich diets tend to have higher average copy numbers of AMY1. Researchers have investigated whether dietary differences contributed to this variation. The relationship is complex, however. Genetic differences can influence diet, while diet can also influence which genetic variants become advantageous. Human evolution is therefore closely connected to what humans eat. Modern humans are also experiencing an unusual combination of environmental exposures. Urbanization, global travel, vaccination, antibiotics, pollution, changing diets, and contact with new pathogens have transformed the conditions under which human biology operates. The immune system is particularly responsive to environmental pressure. Some genetic variants that were advantageous under one disease environment may become less important when medical treatment reduces mortality. At the same time, new infectious diseases can create new selective pressures. This means modern medicine does not necessarily stop evolution. Instead, it can change the direction and strength of selection. If a condition that once prevented survival can now be treated effectively, the relationship between a genetic trait and reproductive success can change. Human technology has therefore become part of the evolutionary environment. Natural selection acts most directly through reproductive success. That means traits influencing fertility, pregnancy, age at reproduction, and reproductive health can potentially experience evolutionary pressures. Researchers have identified genetic variants associated with reproductive traits, including age at first menstruation, age at first reproduction, fertility-related characteristics, and reproductive lifespan. However, these traits are highly complex. They are influenced by hundreds or thousands of genetic variants as well as nutrition, socioeconomic conditions, healthcare, culture, and individual behavior. Therefore, it is difficult to identify one simple direction in which humans are evolving. Human evolution is increasingly polygenic, meaning that many genetic variants each contribute small effects to a trait. This makes modern evolutionary change much harder to observe than a simple trait controlled by one gene. Perhaps the most important evolutionary change is not a specific body feature. It is the increasing genetic mixing of human populations. For much of human history, geographical barriers separated populations. Mountains, deserts, oceans, and long distances limited gene flow. Modern transportation has dramatically reduced these barriers. People now move between continents within hours. Populations that were separated for thousands of years can now intermarry within a few generations. In evolutionary biology, this movement of genes between populations is called gene flow. Gene flow introduces genetic variation into populations and can reduce genetic differences between groups. This does not mean that human populations are becoming genetically identical, but it does mean that the global distribution of human genetic variation is changing. Human evolution today does not look like the evolution shown in textbooks. There is no single direction. Humans are not simply becoming smarter, taller, weaker, stronger, or more technologically advanced through genetic evolution. Different traits experience different pressures. Some traits may become more common. Others may become less common. Some changes may occur in one population, but not another. And many modern changes that look evolutionary may actually be caused by culture, environment, medicine, or behavior rather than changes in DNA. This distinction is essential. If people are becoming taller in a population, for example, that does not automatically mean genetic evolution. Improved nutrition can produce major changes in body size within a few generations without significant genetic change. Evolution requires a change in inherited genetic variation across generations. That process is still occurring. But modern humans have introduced something unprecedented into the evolutionary equation. Humans now modify the environment at enormous speed. Medicine changes survival. Technology changes behavior. Agriculture changes nutrition. Cities change exposure to pathogens. Migration changes gene flow. And reproductive choices increasingly influence which genes are passed to future generations. The strange features humans are evolving today are therefore not necessarily dramatic new body parts or obvious physical transformations. They are often subtle changes in digestion, immunity, metabolism, reproduction, disease resistance, and adaptation to different environments. Human evolution has not ended. It has simply become harder to see. And unlike our ancestors, modern humans are not only adapting to the environment. Humans are constantly changing the environment itself. Subscribe for more amazing facts.